Do you ever feel completely certain about something, only to discover you were missing the bigger picture? That moment when you realize your mind was so busy being right, it forgot to listen. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this tension in all of us, the way our thoughts chatter endlessly, drowning out the deeper silence beneath. He once wrote, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." In other words, our minds love the noise of being certain, of clinging to what's familiar, because it feels safe. But that safety is an illusion. The truth is, the mind can't find silence because it is the noise. You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right, the way your brain latches onto an idea and defends it like a fortress. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they give us a sense of control, a way to navigate the chaos of life. But Nietzsche would ask, what if that control is just another story we tell ourselves? Think back to when you were a kid and believed something utterly certain. Maybe that adults had everything figured out, or that the world was fair. Then, one day, you realized it wasn't true. That moment of discomfort, that crack in your understanding, is exactly where Nietzsche wants us to linger. The mind hates silence because silence means facing what we don't know. It's easier to fill the space with opinions, judgments, and endless mental chatter. But Nietzsche challenges us to question why we need that noise in the first place. Is it because we're afraid of what we'll find if we stop? Imagine standing in a quiet room with nothing but your own breath. No distractions, no clever thoughts to hide behind. For most of us, that's unbearable after a few seconds. We reach for our phones, our memories, our plans, anything to avoid the stillness. This isn't just about meditation or mindfulness. It's about the way we construct our entire sense of reality. Nietzsche saw that our beliefs are often just reflections of our fears and desires, not some ultimate truth. We tell ourselves we're rational, but really, we're storytellers, spinning narratives to make sense of a world that doesn't owe us clarity. Remember the last time you were convinced someone was wrong about you, only to later wonder if you'd misunderstood them. That's the mind's noise at work, jumping to conclusions before the silence can offer a wiser perspective. The irony is that the more we chase certainty, the noisier our minds become. Nietzsche called this our will to truth, the desperate need to prove we're right, even when the truth is messier than we'd like. But what if the real wisdom lies in admitting we don't know, not as a defeat, but as an opening? Think of the last time you argued with someone, digging in your heels, only to realize later they had a point. That shift didn't come from winning the argument. It came from the quiet moment afterward, when the noise faded and you could finally hear something new. This is why the mind resists silence. Silence doesn't care about being right. It doesn't reward our cleverness or soothe our insecurities. It just is. And that's terrifying to a brain wired for survival, for control. Nietzsche's insight was that our greatest growth happens when we step outside that noise, even for a second. When we stop insisting we have the answers and start asking better questions. So the next time you feel absolutely certain about something, pause. Ask yourself, is this truth or just the loudest thought in my head? You might find that the silence beneath the noise holds a deeper kind of knowing. This cracks open a fundamental truth about how we experience life. We begin by seeing things simply, as if the world is straightforward and our reactions to it are automatic. A problem arises and we react. Someone says something and we respond. It feels natural, almost effortless. At this stage, the mind operates like a well-worn path, familiar, predictable, and comfortable. We don't question our impulses because they seem to serve us just fine. Life feels manageable, even if it's not always easy. But then comes the confusing middle. The simplicity starts to unravel. We encounter situations where our usual reactions don't work, where the old patterns leave us feeling stuck or frustrated. Maybe we snap at someone and regret it later, or we realize that our quick judgments don't align with who we want to be. This is where Friedrich Nietzsche's insight hits hard. He said that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but what he really meant was that growth comes from wrestling with discomfort. The middle phase is messy because it forces us to question everything we took for granted. We start to see that the mind's noise, the constant reactions, the endless chatter, is what keeps us from real clarity. You might be someone who resists change at first. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions because the familiar, even if it's limiting, feels safer than the unknown. We start noticing how often we react without thinking, how quickly we defend or deflect instead of pausing to understand. Nietzsche called this the difference between the reactive and the creative. Knee-jerk reactions come from habit, from the mind's need to protect itself, but thoughtful responses come from a deeper place, from the willingness to sit with uncertainty. The tough middle phase is where we learn to tolerate that uncertainty, where we begin to see that the noise in our heads isn't the truth, it's just noise. And then, slowly, a new clarity emerges. It doesn't arrive with a bang, but with a quiet shift. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately. You might notice that old triggers don't land as hard as they used to. This isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. We start to see that the mind's chaos is just a surface layer, and beneath it, there's a capacity for stillness. Nietzsche's idea of strength through struggle makes sense here. The confusion of the middle phase wasn't an obstacle, but a necessary dismantling. We couldn't find silence until we recognized the noise for what it was. This journey isn't linear. Some days, the old reactions creep back in, and the noise feels louder than ever. But even then, there's a difference. Before, we didn't know there was another way. Now, we do. We've tasted the clarity that comes from stepping back, from letting the initial wave of reaction pass. And each time we do, it gets easier. The mind's habit of noise is strong, but it's not invincible. We start by seeing things simply. We stumble into the confusing middle, where nothing makes sense and everything feels harder. But through this discomfort, we begin to see the cracks in what we once thought was solid ground. It's unsettling, like standing on a floor that shifts slightly with every step. But here's the thing, those cracks let in the light. They show us where we've been clinging to ideas or habits that no longer serve us, where we've been wearing shoes that pinch our feet without even realizing it. And while it might feel easier to ignore those discomforts, to keep shuffling along in the same old ways, something in us knows there's more. At first, the journey feels slow. We might catch ourselves falling back into familiar patterns, reacting to old triggers in the same worn-out ways. But then, almost without noticing, something shifts. Maybe it's a moment of pause before responding to a frustrating email, or a quiet decision to let go of a grievance that used to eat at us. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier, not because life suddenly got simpler, but because you're no longer fighting yourself in the process. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much. The coworker who always interrupts, the traffic that used to ruin your morning. It's not that these things vanish, but they lose their grip on your mood. It's like realizing you've been carrying a heavy bag everywhere and finally setting it down. You didn't notice the weight until it was gone. This isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about no longer letting the imperfect parts steal your peace. As we move through this, we start to see how much of our stress came from trying to fit into molds that were never meant for us. The Barnum effect, that uncanny feeling when vague advice feels deeply personal, shows up here. We've all had moments where a horoscope or a personality test description seemed eerily accurate, not because it was tailored to us, but because it was broad enough to resonate. The real work is in spotting where we've been doing the same thing with our own lives, accepting generic narratives about who we're supposed to be or how we're supposed to act. But here's the beautiful part. The more we question those narratives, the more we discover what's actually true for us. It's not about rejecting everything we've been taught, but about sifting through it all and keeping only what aligns with our deepest values. Together, we discover that freedom isn't about having no constraints, but about choosing the ones that matter. It's the difference between being locked in a room and standing in a field with a fence around it. One feels like a prison, the other like a boundary that lets you thrive. This isn't a linear process. Some days, it feels like we've taken 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But even those steps back are part of the journey. They show us where we're still holding on, where we might need to gentle with ourselves. And slowly, the way we move through the world changes. We start to trust ourselves more, not because we're never wrong, but because we're no longer afraid of being wrong. We learn that missteps aren't failures. They're just part of figuring it out. There's a lightness that comes with this, a sense of space where there used to be clutter. It's not that life stops being messy, but the mess stops feeling like a personal failing. We begin to see our struggles as part of a larger human experience, not as proof that we're doing it wrong. And in that shift, something unexpected happens. We become kinder to ourselves and to others. Friedrich Nietzsche once described freedom like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. That's what this feels like. It's not some grand, dramatic moment, but a quiet relief, a return to what's natural. Together we discover that the truest kind of freedom isn't about escaping or rejecting, but about coming home to ourselves. And from that place, everything else flows. The journey doesn't end here, of course. There will always be new layers to uncover, new ways to grow. But now, we're no longer afraid of the discomfort. We know it's just the signal that we're stretching, that we're alive. And that's worth celebrating.